Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we are live, free, and uncensored. Not only on Rockfin, we're on YouTube for this one, because this one's important, because not everybody can be live, free, and definitely not uncensored, even if they've made a backup channel and done nothing, in my humble opinion, because, I can read at a 4th grade level, to spread medical misinformation whatsoever, while we're told just yesterday you will need your vaccine card or a negative test to go see a Yankee and Mets game. And by the way, if you're in California on the other coast and you'd like to have some semblance of happiness and joy and get on an amusement park ride, no screaming aloud, not an Onion headline, a real headline in March of 2021. And of course, I am joined for the next half hour with Ryan Christian of The Last American Vagabond. And he just recently had his 2nd channel taken down from YouTube. So I really want to start there, Ryan. And then we want to, I know you wanted to talk about the Biden video, and I did 2 videos on it in the last 48 hours. So, and it even changed my mind. So I think that's also an important topic. But before we get there, I think it's important for people to have information that maybe allows them to change their mind. And you put a lot of that information out, sir. However, in 2021, that no longer seems to be allowed on the Alphabet Google-owned platform YouTube.
Indeed. The point I made with Patreon is they made it quite clear that misinformation is when you're sourcing the claims that you're making. They're like, you can comment all you want. They said that in a statement to somebody who reached out, but misinformation is where we draw the line. It's like, okay, well, it's misinformation because we're citing the things that we're commenting on. And that's the point. And people should have the ability to think for themselves. Now, on that point about Biden, by the way, I actually think that's completely irrelevant to larger discussions. I was just curious. I find it very entertaining and very telling in a lot of ways. That's probably your same conclusion about it. So,
well, you know what? Well. There's some interesting things there. So the first thing is, and by the way, I want to talk about what we can say and what we can't say, because we probably can't even go over how awesome this headline is. And that's why I put this exclusively today over at Rockfin, that a rare quote unquote COVID arm that leaves Moderna vaccine recipients with a giant red rash may be good. It's a good sign that your immune system is ramping up to prevent infection. But expert here, that's not in quotation marks at all. And you would think if COVID arm and good in big letters would be, when they show you how great this is, it might be. Totally off the subject. Guys, I do want to remind everybody, just because Ryan is so banned and does such great work, lastamericanvagabond.com. lastamericanvagabond.com. lastamericanvagabond.com.
I want to add to that real quick is that this is something I think you've made the point on yourself, is that it's not a side effect if it happens every time or even regularly, right? It's an effect. And that's the whole point. I mean, even if it happens rarely, it's still an effect. It's not a side effect. They're just negative effects of this injection. Right?
Yeah.
And the harm is almost constant. So that's clearly an effect.
So rare is what they always lead it with, right? But then good is in the big letters. It's all, that pre-programming. Now to the Biden point. So when I saw it at first, I'm like, there's no way that this could be fake. Why would it be fake? But then I went and I found the highest definition footage of it, right? I found 720p of the forward. And I got to tell you, I did a whole video. It looked like compositing. I blew it up in Premiere. I had it side by side. I'm going frame by frame. I was pretty convinced. And by the way, I didn't think they just green screened them in there. It looked like compositing to me. And it was weird because on the forward video, there's a green hue on one of the things, but I'm like, you wouldn't necessarily have to green hue that out to mask it, etc. And I was almost 100% sure the thing was totally fake. And I didn't know why, because I thought he was there. I didn't think it was a deep fake, all those things. But I felt that was a matte composite. Now, Mick West, to his credit, he does a video. Now, I watch it twice. I'm still not convinced, right? Because he doesn't have this side angle. And I had the side angle, but not in high definition and not the full thing. So after I watch his video, I'm like, dude, I don't like pushing disinfo, misinfo. I'm going to go grab this. I'm going to see if I can find the side video and anything else I can find in highest definition. So I get it. And he made the best point he made on it, and I think it's the correct one, by the way. Again, I can admit I got something wrong, is that you can see it in one frame that the boom mic actually hits his finger, right? And that also kind of gives the distortion and illusion because on the end of the mic, it's fuzzy and it's not a solid always, right? That it may be slipping through, but it's not. You can see not only on one angle, but both angles exactly when it happens, right? And the shadows are there and everything. So it is more than likely 99+% an optical illusion. The problem is, my man, you have a guy in office right now who called the lady who's supposed to be serving under him the president again yesterday. Okay.
I didn't know. I didn't catch that.
Yeah. I mean, what do you expect when you've got a literal zombie up there that can barely read off a teleprompter, right? And he doesn't take real questions. He's grandstanding with a mask outside. And then you see something that's crazy goofy. And I know that you do some editing work and stuff. And I'll be honest. I made a mistake, but I think it's okay when you correct it.
Hold on. I'd like to comment on this in general because there are a few points throughout that process, right? So, I mean, I wouldn't, first of all, to your point, the end point there, that is the most important part of this. We all watch how often mainstream media gets things wrong. It's not impossible to make mistakes or to evaluate something and give your opinion. It turns out that opinion is not actually the way it went. It's just the point is we should not be afraid to engage and have these conversations, to look at it and say, what do we think? And what, that's what you did. And there's nothing wrong with that. And on top of that, by the way, I'm not completely convinced after looking at this all the way across, just there's the same idea. I went through this just kind of out of fascination because I tend to put these things aside. Like it's just, whether it is or not, yes, it speaks to his deteriorating mental state. It speaks to the way they cultivate everything. But there's so many bigger things happening. But there's a lot of points to make about it. It's fascinating that people will jump on this and they're certain about something before we ever really understand it. And there's, it divides into factions, which is the point. Right? This is totally shill, fake news, green screen. And then anybody that goes, well, I'm not sure. Oh, fake news, shill. It just divides everybody. Mm-hmm. The point is that we should be able to digest this and look through it. And look, when I first saw it is, I'm like, that's fake. Like right when you see that first video where you see his hand come in front of the thing, you're like, okay, that's very obviously distorted the way how, and then the obvious first point is how could the microphone be behind his arm? But then you come to find out the side frame and you see that on the booms and the whole thing. But I still argue, of course, the narrative that's been fluffed after the fact seems to make sense.
Yeah.
Look, we all know that they can lie about things. They could fake pictures after the fact. So, I mean, why would they do it about this whole thing is where I come down to. It doesn't seem to make sense. But if you look at that picture in the beginning or just the film of the arm, it just doesn't look right. There's something weird about it. And that doesn't mean that it's fake.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean we should be, it's so quick to be like, oh, that's fake news for people that don't want to believe anything that goes against the narrative. The whole thing speaks to the fact that we have made up our minds before we even look at the information. You know what I mean? And that's what I think you're trying to show is that you're willing to look at it and discuss it. And then we find more out and you continue to evolve your opinion. That's called intelligence, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate that, but we don't have a lot of it anymore. And the other narrative that got kind of tried to get spun on guys like me that they've been wanting so bad, Ryan, so bad, is that I fell for a QAnon hoax because I was saying it's a deep fake president and Biden's not alive. And I never said any of those things, right? In my thumbnail, it says deep fake president with a question mark. And I start the video clearly saying I don't think this is a deep fake. I even show the 3-minute cut where he walks out of the White House and behind trees and behind the visitor center where they check you, all that stuff, because I'm trying to be genuine because I believe we can make mistakes, but in this world, talking about the QAnon nonsense and trying to project that, I'm not sure you've seen this yet, but now 73 House Democrats have actually put it on paper to expel Marjorie Taylor Greene, somebody they already convicted of thought crimes in Congress, to remove her from the 2 committees that she was elected to serve on. So now, Ryan, Jason Burmis can win an incredibly corrupt election against all odds. Because if you don't think there's election fraud in national elections or in the congressional level or in the Senate level or even in your local level in many cases, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. It's absolutely true. Now you beat that. And because of things you posted or said earlier in your life, true or not, no one's ever been under this scrutiny before. You can't serve here and fuck you. We're just going to kick you out anyway. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I first of all, I would be hesitant to argue that they beat that. Like, it seems that way, but it's just as likely that that's completely part of the plan too, right? We can acknowledge that, but
Yes.
I'm with you. It seems that way, but the biggest point here is the first thing that you said. It's what does this really show us at a fundamental level? These are people that are arguing to be acting as the represented officials of what, the embodiment of our collective will and all the nonsense they tell us. And then they turn around and go, but we don't like her. So we'll just circumvent your votes and your opinions and just move her out of the way. And we're all like, yay, or at least on the one side.
Yeah.
Yay, democracy. It's like, what? Go Guaido, democracy. It's like, it's crazy.
And that's faded away. Just the fact that,
kind of. Biden endorsed him again, despite how nobody, it's like, who is Guaido again? Like, it's embarrassing.
I mean, I have to remind the audience, because it's been out of the news cycle for so long, that, the president before this one, the one that could actually speak and he's kind of witty and they demonize him and all that stuff, he just announced a guy named Guaido was president of an entire country that we don't run, with another guy named Maduro, who happens to run the country, going, no, that's not the case. And
it was elected with an overwhelming majority that was seen by 30 independent observers from different countries. And Jimmy Carter said, it's like, but it's all fake because Trump said so, or a government said so.
I'm sure Putin was behind it somewhere. I mean, he's a murderer. And that's the new cartoon that we're being built up for, right? He's like, I mean, just that, I don't know if you saw pieces of it, that pre-taped Biden interview, how many takes they took, God knows. And that's the thing. I don't think that they're not using de-aging software on his taped interviews. I think it's going, honestly, beyond just the makeup and God knows in the plastic and the amphetamines they're probably putting him on so he can be awake 4 hours a day. To the point where, they're just not 100% Irishman, right? Not 100% De Niro, but maybe shaving 5-10 years off that guy. Because I watch him 15 years ago. Hell, I watch him 5 years ago. He's a different person. And anybody who's telling me he's not a different person never watched Joey B in action. The man moved, the man talked. He was a slick part of Washington. That's the reason they put him in there as the puppet in chief in the first place. But now we got a puppet in chief that's behind fenced walls and militarization. Right. That's not something we've talked about in this atmosphere of censorship. So let's get your take on that. Will we ever see a demilitarized DC again?
I mean, it's hard to say, who could know for sure, but my opinion, no. I mean, it seems like look at how it's evolved so far. Just a temporary thing for the election or for inauguration. And now we're going to push it out for another couple of weeks because Trump and because white supremacy. And now it's going to, we're going to push it out till March because of so-and-so. Now they're arguing it should go on forever. That's actually being argued, right? And in the whole time, just like every other parts of COVID and whatever else, people like us are going, well, that's probably going to go on forever. Right in the beginning, no, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, and then it continues to be justified, So their actions are always speaking louder than their words. We have to watch that. And what is it showing us? They are afraid of you, America. They're scared of you. They don't like you. They think you're dangerous, right? That's the whole point.
It is so in your face. And if people can't realize that a vaccine passport to see a Yankee or Mets game is not dangerous, if they don't realize that Bill de Blasio announcing that police are going to talk to you, even if you haven't committed a crime, and they're going to warn you that maybe, again, it is a crime, even though it's not a crime. Let's read his actual quote, because you can watch it. It's surreal. Even if something is not a criminal case, a perpetrator being confronted by the city, whether it's NYPD or another agency, contact tracers, and being told that what they've done was very hurtful to another person, all about feelings, and could have ever repeated, lead to criminal charges, that's another important piece of the puzzle. One of the things officers are trained to do is give warnings. If someone has done something wrong, but not rising to criminal level, it's perfectly appropriate for an NYPD officer to talk to them, to say that was not appropriate.
So what are these school mums now? They're going to walk around and slap you on the wrist with a ruler when you're saying things out of turn. I mean, this is exactly what we keep telling you is happening out there. Like, it's incredible. They're just completely going, well, it's not. I mean, this is the whole this gets into, I mean, you could probably list this off in every possible agenda we speak about, where they're fuzzying the lines, where it's like, well, I mean, look at hate speech and free speech, the same thing. You know, it's like, well, it's not technically, but it leads to this. You know, this is the whole narrative, and everything we're doing is becoming subjective. And guess who gets to make the call? The people that we're concerned about. You know, and then what's even funnier is it always ends up where, you know, it's Biden now, with Trump before, where the people in power are like, yay, give him the power because he'll always be there, right? You know, and it's like, what happens if it's in Trump 2024? Right? It's the same thing in reverse. Like, all the people that were screaming that support Trump, give him all these powers. It's like, what if Biden wins? That'll never happen. He's going to win again. You know, and it just shows you how we continue through this damn cycle of giving power to the same problematic people. Just one half of it.
I completely agree. And, you know, to speak to this new point of coercion through sports, through entertainment, and what Cuomo has done, somebody that they've circumvented all of his authoritarian policies and dictates that killed people in nursing homes. And I would argue, scandals going on today that are harming people. They made it about sexual assault. And that's why he's able to say things like this, where you must show proof of a recent negative test or immunization to go to the ball game. Now, one of the points I was bringing up with my audience, Ryan, is one that you've been talking about and almost no one else is, that these tests are collecting Americans' DNA data. So now I have to want to have my DNA taken and possibly shared with corporate America with a K, because it ain't America, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Forget, the funding stems back to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is something that's tied to Gavi and tied to even the Trump administration and the whole thing. It's the whole government, right? We need to see that. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think it's important because aside from the fact that we know there were all these false positives, aside from the fact we know that the PCR test was recently ramped down and we saw the results of what happened in the 9+ months we were relying on it. Despite all those things, it's either you get your DNA harvested or you get a boop boop or Johnny can't watch the baseball game. And I was a ball player. I got my high school fucking jacket sitting right there, number 32. All right, little Jason Burmis had dreams of being a Yankee. Those dreams may have been crushed, but I would never have thought that the dreams of me being able to go to Yankee Stadium as a free man would also be crushed. And that's today, Ryan. That's today. So how do we explain to people that governments and corporations don't just outright have the right to access my DNA? Because I don't think a lot of people get that at this point.
Right. Well, here's the interesting thing is all of it's sort of done under this blanket authority of like, well, it's just in the best interest of a group, right? Like just kind of like vaguely, like it's for your safety. But the problem is that I don't even think most Americans are even aware that's even a possibility right now. And on top of that, they would argue that's not true. That's one of the parts of the story that's still being like fake news to the ground, right? Every part of this narrative has been yelled at until we stop, masks, PCR tests, and that, to the larger point, recognize that people like Jason Burmis, people like myself and the independent media have been calling these things out from the very beginning. The moment the PCR test was very clearly showing that there was a huge capacity for false positives, we were screaming and being censored for doing so. And now it's slowly being recognized. And it's the same regard here. It's absolutely staggering that we can be so right in this discussion from the very beginning, and they'll continue to push us off to the side. It's very frustrating, but it applies to every aspect of this. But the PCR part is a deliberate aspect that they know, even on the CDC website, it says 30% full, or it did until they muddled it and put it in some corner where it's impossible to find. But there's been numerous studies after the fact that have confirmed at least 30%. Yes. Dr. Scoglio, PhD, said at least 95 if you're over 40 to 45 cycle threshold, which is arguably what still most of them are using.
Exactly. But again, selective testing, selective enforcement, selective media presentation on who's doing a good job and trying to ignore that spring break went on, that tens of thousands of people twice gathered in D.C., maybe hundreds of thousands the second time. There was no outbreak after Sturgis. All these things, they want you to circumvent reality so that you can have your vaccine passport to go see a concert Shout out to Jamie Deluxe, who's in the comments, who's also felt that ban hammer, talking about Ian from the Stone Roses canceling his performances because he refused to subjugate his fans to vaccine passports. Good. We need more of that. We need more artists stepping up like Ian and less celebrities bootlicking like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So, obviously, I've transitioned now more and more to Rockfin. I know you're doing the same. And what I've been doing is when it gets to the boop stuff, I let people know, tail end of the video, we're leaving YouTube. We're going over to Rockfin so I don't have to self-censor. So you can watch what I really think, so we can go deep into this. Because when you can't talk about Senate hearings, when you're getting banned for daring to discuss that Anthony Fauci might be some kind of a dark overlord, right? For instance, this right here, let's bring it up a little bit bigger for folks. I've been showing people this, but this is the FOIA request. And by the way, his first one was all the way back in April. He kept having to refine it until he finally got a real response. And this was from October of 2020. He gets a response 2 months later asking, and this is for the entire state of New York, this guy that lived like 60 miles from where I came from, the efficacy, pro or con, of wearing masks, face coverings by the general public in an effective method to stop the spread of infectious disease such as influenza or COVID-19. Reasonable. And then the second one is to see if they have any safety risks associated with long-term wearing of masks or face coverings by asymptomatic or healthy people. Also a good question. Please be advised that after conducting a diligent search, no records respondent to your request have been located. Now, I show this to all the fact-checking fannies out there, and they're just like, they don't know what to do. Maybe it's not in New York State. New York State just can't find all these tests. That's something that's now been around for 3+ months, covered by no media other than the alternative media. Even I didn't cover it enough. That was tweeted out by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The guy, shout out to William Houston for doing that. And people act like that's not an official document, that someone didn't ask for the official science and then was railroaded. And we're constantly being railroaded, brother.
I talk about the FOIA request thing all the time. It's frustrating because we've seen, that's an example right there. But they can just refuse something like that, then it's not really what we think it is. You know what I mean? Or just ignore it. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that unless you have the resources of some of these larger outlets, you won't ever get them to do anything. You have to really light the fire under their feet to make them do what they don't want to do, even in regard to FOIA requests. But to that point exactly, there is. I have done on the show alone, to the second part specifically, have shown you the NIH studies, the British Medical Journal studies from explicitly finding health issues with wearing masks for hours at a time, not 8 hours, but just a couple hours. And we're talking verifiable reduction in blood oxygen level. I mean, there's no way that they don't know that those are there. Or the one that they think is most relevant right now is the one in regard to cloth masks. The only random controlled trial that's been done, it was comparing cloth with medical masks. And they find that cloth masks shouldn't be even used because they can increase your risk of infection by building moisture. And they also point out that cloth specifically, even droplets go through 97% of the time. Medical masks, 44%. That's it. That is a British Medical Journal study. So they don't know that's there? Of course they do. So they're lying. Yeah. Flat out.
Of course they know. Listen, and I don't want to go too hard because, we're towards the tail end of this anyway, and God forbid we get taken down for medical misinformation. No. But again, I keep pointing to this study because even though I can't say the ivermectin word or dare talk about that, so far I haven't gotten hit for this Oxford AstraZeneca study, again, that shows a 90% actual efficacy rate in participants that took inhaled budesonide to stay out of hospitals, not require urgent care, and also have a quicker resolution of fever symptoms, fewer persistent symptoms after 28 days. You know what they didn't get? Let me show you what they didn't get. They didn't get the good arm. They didn't get the good arm. It's weird. They got a $5 to $20 steroid. 90% of them did okay. And they didn't get the good sign arm, the COVID arm. They didn't get that. That's just so bizarre. So, Ryan, I know that you've done 2 channels. You've obviously been unjustly taken down by YouTube. I'm on strike 2 of which are for talking about ivermectin. Another is because I had dared to have Alex Jones on and not have him as a crazy person. You know, they took that, you know, Tim Pool can interview him, Steven Crowder can interview him. I show facts and documents. No. So what is the next move? Because obviously this platform that we're on is still the largest one out there, and it's gamed the system to make people believe it's really the only important one out there. So what are we going to do in the next, you know, I don't know. We could say 3 to 6 days, 3 to 6 months. I mean, at this point, this thing is accelerating so much. We're seeing just massive censorship. We're seeing people attack the Rockfin platform now and trying to get others in alternative journalism to do so, to marginalize it even more. What's the next step?
Yeah. By the way, on that exact note, I've just, because there's been so much going on, I'm going to be doing an overview of all the information around that topic, and specifically the person that's making those claims, just because I'm now being attacked unnecessarily, just because I'm just tired of letting that be the case, because no one's pushing back against that. But on the note of going forward, you know, and I've always been saying this, and it's still just as valid as ever, is we need to continue to broaden out and use as many as possible, you know, and yes, that means we need to put a little more effort into what we do. And there are platforms that help you multi-stream and post and so on. But at the end of the day, the more places we can put our content, the better. And what we need to do as individuals, not necessarily content creators, but just the person out there watching, the supporter, is you need to find a place to watch and engage that is not supporting these problematic platforms. There is a necessary point or necessary. There's a reason that we should be continuing as creators to, at the very least, get our content on things like YouTube, like Jason is doing, because there's still people that are lost out there. We have to remember our primary objective is reaching those people, you know, so we need to continue to do so. But as the independent people out there, you need to go and ultimately go to the BitChutes and the libraries and the Rockfins, where you can actually engage in the chat and continue to do so. But I had some frustrating news actually today about a little bit of a delay on the thing that I'm actually working on, but we're still looking at, you know, within this next month, there's going to be something coming out that I have been involved in, you know, just as, you know, just one part of it, but there's some really talented people in this that will be a new platform. Awesome. You know, and I'm not asking anybody to trust it, bank on it, believe it until it comes. I just want people to know that there is something that will be, that it was designed to be a counterbalance to YouTube, that has all the same things with all the same, you know, streaming and donations and embeds and scheduling and like the whole, anything you could think of. And it was all guided by somebody like me. In fact, me personally sitting there going, no, that's what YouTube did wrong. Here's what we need, you know? So there's a lot going. So just, we need to continue to push back. And I actually get on the last point, and I understand completely why it's even necessary in some regard to not talk about things on YouTube and self-censor and different topics. But I've just personally almost felt like I want to push back in that regard. And that's why I've obviously been censored for doing so. But I think it's important that we do our best to not give in to their pressure. You know what I mean? And I think you're doing a great job, Jason. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it, brother. And I think the same thing. You know, if I can't really express how I feel about the article, I can at least show people the article and say, hey, we're going to go over it here. And you can read the headline now. You can imagine what I might think about it. But please come over so I can maybe show you some other things as well. I usually love having Ryan on for an hour and a half. I've got another podcast I'm pre-committed to. I'm also going to be on the Jay Dyer show tonight. So nice. I just want to say, man, you're doing an awesome job. Your website is top tier, if not the best alternative media website out there. Keep it up, brother. And we do have to keep fighting. Period. Amen. That's it. We can't give in. We will not give in. And it's not self-censorship in the same way that they hope, where we're just not going to say anything and hope to make our little minstrel dance on YouTube. But to get people involved and then come over and see the hardcore information. But I have a funny feeling they're going to start censoring people for videos outside of YouTube too. That's probably the next step.
Like Patreon is doing now. So I agree. Thank you.
Exactly. Ryan, I love you, brother. I will see you shortly. Ryan from The Last American Vagabond, everybody. He keeps killing it. And you should support him no matter what. I've got a roll. I want to thank all my viewers on Rockfin. Okay, rokfin.com/Jason Burmis. That's how you support me. You go over, you make the free Rockfin account. You get to see all the uncensored stuff. If you make the premium account, guess what? It's a Netflix for creators, and you're going to get some of the most top tier information out there. Jamie Deluxe, who's in the chat over here in YouTube, he's over there. And guess what? Titus Frost just joined. Pretty excited about that. Congratulations, Titus. I'm glad that you're over on the Rockfin family. I love you guys. And I will see you later tonight on the Jay Dyer channel. So make sure to go check me out.